I think any judge in the country welcomes the evidence of an expert, but with one important qualification. I've read many experts' reports which are so full of jargon and tables and references that it's almost impossible to read what the expert is actually saying. So if that could be borne in mind when the experts among us are preparing reports for courts, judges prefer the Ladybird book of expert testimony rather than the doctoral thesis. But it's a serious point, because a lot of time is taken up trying to decipher, as I say, very, very weighty reports with a lot of that stuff in it. It's inescapable, and sometimes when you're dealing with very difficult technical issues, there's no getting around it. But it is something that I find there's a huge variation in the quality from that point of view. I'm making no criticism of the learning or the learnedness of the person preparing the report. It's just the way it sometimes appears in print. The other thing we heard about today was this interagency cooperation between the Gardaí and TUSLA. And as I say, I hope, as Superintendent Daly said, that is the dawn of a new day in that regard, because in the district court in particular, what you find are the cases where that doesn't happen. That's probably why they're in court, or a lot of the reason why they're in court. And we're constantly bumping up against these conflicts. And that brings me then to the probably one of the most important things that came out from a number of the presentations today, and it's the thorny old issue of resources. I see before me all the agencies involved struggling under enormous pressure. My social work friends from Donegal would probably be surprised to hear me say that I have the highest of regard for social workers. I think they do a job that is almost unimaginable for me. I think it's so difficult to do it. They do it with great skill and great dedication, but they are absolutely crushed by the lack of resources and the lack of additional, personnel, I think, as well. And the same is true of the Child and Family Agency in respect of the services that it can provide. The Gardaí, I mentioned the case where there's huge delays because of the lack of Garda resources, lack of trained personnel. The Legal Aid Board, cases are delayed endlessly because people can't get legal aid, or there are delays in legal aid. It's not quite as bad in childcare, but it can have an impact. The courts themselves and the judiciary. Ireland, even if all of the judicial vacancies which are currently present were appointed, has by far the lowest number of judges per head of population in the 47 countries in the OECD. So we could do with a few more judges. Similarly, psychology services. We find in childcare cases that months go by while the Child and Family Agency is trying to access psychology from within its own resources, and then we find they can't do it, and the search has to start for an outside or private provision. That causes delay. And in terms of the life of a child, delay is a huge enemy. We think in the court system and in the social work system and the guardian system in cycles of a month. We can grant an interim care order for a period not exceeding 29 days. So that tends to mean that cases are recycled month by month by month, particularly where there's no consent on the part of one or more of the respondents. And we go into court, and it happened to me yesterday in Letterkenny, and some of the social workers are there. We go through the motions of reading the reports and hearing the evidence and hearing the objections from the parents, barristers or solicitors, and the rows over access, and then it's kicked back for another month. And the child who's at the bottom of all that is wondering, why is it taking so long, and they're told, okay, it'll be back up again in court next month and maybe a decision will be made then. That's an eternity in the life, particularly of a young child. Donna brought a child to see me there a few months back about a particular issue, and it had been consuming her for several months, and she just could not understand why month after month after month this decision wasn't being made for her. So we do well to remember that. Now, unfortunately, resources are always at a premium, and there are no votes in campaigning for extra resources for the Child and Family Agency. You certainly get no votes for suggesting that there should be more judges appointed, or that psychology services should be enhanced. But they're the sort of thing, they're the practical things that make all of our jobs fit together. And in an ideal world, we would be able to deal with these cases much faster, bring them to a conclusion. So could I finish by thanking all of the speakers that presented papers to us today. Some of them have left, but I have to say I attend many conferences in my life, but I don't think I've ever been at one where the level of expertise and the quality of the presentations has been as consistently high as it was here today. So on your behalf, I'd like to thank all of the contributors. And I'd like to thank Tigala. It took me ages to work out what that actually stood for when I first started seeing it on letterheads. But I'd like to thank them for having the initiative to organise a conference like this. The huge attendance for a conference like this was a testament to the quality of the organisation and the interest in the subject. And I hope that there will be more conferences such as this where we can tease out other issues in this interesting and endlessly varied field. But I want to thank Tigala for doing that, and in particular I want to thank the organisers and most of all the lady who got me into this, Morag. I know she has put an enormous amount of work into it, as have her colleagues on the organising committee, so thank them on your behalf too. So it was very nice to meet you all. It was very nice to have the opportunity to say my few words, and I'd like to wish you all a pleasant evening. Go out and enjoy the Sligo sunshine and safe journey home.